As many of you guys are already aware, I am a Marine attached to the 6th Com Battalion Reserve Unit in Brooklyn, New York. Before all my training, I was just coming off my first year of college, hoping to maybe never return to the low-budget wonderland of Tibbetts Brook Park as a seasonal lifeguard. Yeah, I don't think so. I joined just like most others did, seeking to seemingly better my overall quality of life and to pursue a challenge most dared to attempt. And I figured if I did not turn out the way I thought it would, I would probably just go dumpster dive behind Panera Bread at Central Park. We're fast forward coming back from my training. It was slightly concerning to me though how I was going to apply what I learned from the Corps to a civilian context, both practically and emotionally. Practically, I had to get a job. Now I was a radio field operator and there weren't that many things to apply what I had learned here in the civilian side to what I learned in the Corps. But suddenly things had shifted once again in my life, and though the respect I had received from civilians while I was in uniform existed, it didn't seem to exist while I was out of it. And now that felt different. Now let's hold on to that. I assume this is how Vietnam veteran Carlos Hathcock and Afghan soldiers Sebastian Junger felt on a more severe level when they had a come time for them to come back home from the war. One day, Sebastian had a panic attack on the subway. He claims that the lights were too bright, trains going too fast, people were too loud. And it turns out, Sebastian was suffering from short-term PTSD. Or is that the right term that we should be using? Stop and think for a second. And remember, we talked about that feeling of being different. So let's stop and think about these statistics from the Public Health VA website. Since the Civil War, the intensity of war going forward has decreased along with the casualty rates. However, disability rates have increased. Now this is a problem. They should both be going in the same direction, but they're not. The Afghan casualty rate was 1/3 of what it was in Vietnam, but also produced 3 times the disability rate. About 10% of the US military right now is in active combat. People are killing other people. People are watching their friends die and all types of chaos around them. But about half of our military is filing for PTSD compensation from the government. Those numbers really don't add up now, do they? Now that phantom 40% of vets who are filing for PTSD and other related symptoms are not doing it because of what happened out in the battlefield or maybe because they feel suicidal, which turns out to have no statistical connection at all. It's actually related to our modern society in which we live in that is alienating our veterans. That is our problem right now. Now let's backtrack to an earlier ancient times of the Navajo tribe and the Apache tribes. These people are always fighting and moving from place to place. Imagine that. Yet they come home and they're just fine. Now why is that? Maybe it's because they had that sense of being a more cohesive tribal society. And with that, you can get over trauma pretty quickly. Because everyone is going through the exact same thing. Living in that type of environment, everyone is relating everything to each other. There's stuff to talk about, things to relate to. Going forward, modern society has put a strain on the human psyche by every metric we have. As a matter of fact, if you live in modern society, it is proven that you are likely to suffer from depression 8 times than the average rate in your lifetime than living in a poor Umbrian society. Let's take another example. Urban women in Nigeria. Nigeria, one of the most chaotic, corrupt, violent nations out there, compared to urban women in North America. Turns out, North American urban women have a higher depression rate. Now, let's go back to our vets. What is wrong with them? Maybe they didn't experience that tribal closeness overseas with their unit. But yet they slept, trained, and ate together. But when they come home, they have to give all that up. They come back to a modern society with people who weren't in the military, which is just fine, but it's hard for everyone. Therefore, we could have been carelessly throwing around the word PTSD this entire time. Instead, we should be using another terminology that would allow them to try imagining a trauma that did not happen and help them attach a word to a feeling that is actually happening right now. If you take a look at the Israeli military, they have a PTSD rate of 1%. They're coming back to a community where everyone understands what is happening, and they're that one big tribe. I propose a similar solution, the process of conscription, with obviously having some type of certain boundaries that hold those who can't qualify to be part of the military. We can look at one more scenario to prove this process to be true. According to an article from the National Center of Biotech Info, after 9/11, the homicide and suicide rate went down by 40%. Combat vets of previous wars with PTSD had even stated that their symptoms went down after 9/11. The idea is if you traumatize an entire society, we don't fall apart and turn on each other. We come together and unifies. We tribalize. And conscription is not just the benefit with those with PTSD-related issues, but some people may find it very beneficial to join the service because it can produce intangible qualities like leadership, camaraderie, discipline, and determination, all in which contribute to a healthy and efficient working and social environment. As I come to conclude this speech, I'll leave it off with a more realistic note. The best way to prevent trauma from war is to not go to war. But unfortunately, we're just not there as a species yet. We train our soldiers for war. Let's train them to come home too. Thank you.